Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa will use the third SA Investment Conference to ensure previous commitments are made a reality. This year's investment conference takes place amidst a pandemic that has further crippled South Africa's already ailing economy. 664 billion rand in pledges have been made since the first summit. Well, eNCA's Business Editor Devan Murugan is at the conference. Let's get an idea from him. Devan, a very good morning to you. And this year, of course, is a little different with the COVID-19 and, of course, the global impact of this pandemic as well. What can we actually realistically expect to get out of this year?
Now, you're quite right, Yuvek. Good morning. This year is different indeed. In fact, we are only expecting a handful of investors here compared to the thousands or 1,000 general amount that was here in the previous 2 years. We had a introductory, or if you like, a first session yesterday, which was a webinar. Didn't kick off very smoothly as expected by government. We had some technical glitches, online issues on there, and I suppose it was quite fitting because it speaks directly to some of the investor concerns, that being one of them being spectrum and bandwidth. And I think that was a clear illustration of what could go wrong if we don't sort that one out. But as you say, 664 billion rand in pledges since 2018. We've only seen 170 billion rand go through the pipeline. So this is really about securing what was already pledged in that over the past 2 years. It's not really about going out there and getting new investments. That's unlikely to happen on a large scale.
All right, well, regardless of that, though, I suppose the task of convincing those, Devan, who might have something to hand out to us is going to be a big one, considering just the state of our economy, even, pre-COVID, pre-pandemic as well. And then let's throw in COVID on top of that. I mean, who has what to offer us? And even then, are we the people they actually want to give it to, seeing as we look like we can't manage our money at all?
Yeah, you're quite right about that, because remember that South Africa's economic issues extend beyond or before COVID-19. We have structural issues in this economy that investors have been calling for, the governance of SOEs, for example, labour policies that they point out to, infrastructure issues. So, of course, COVID-19 may have worsened or exacerbated those problems, but, of course, South Africa needs to convince investors that they can go beyond that. I want to bring in the President's economic advisor, Trudy Makaya, who joins me now. Trudy, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. And let's start just there, that this conference really, and you've said this before, is not so much about focusing on huge colossal amounts, but the presidency wants to secure and make sure that whatever was pledged before turns into brick and mortar, turns into factories and creates jobs. Is that the focus this afternoon?
That is the focus. It's an ongoing conversation with our investors, and we felt that it's important that we keep reinforcing the message that their investments are important, that we acknowledge that they could invest in other countries, even domestic investors could go elsewhere, they could sit on their cash. So when they do choose to invest, we need to encourage that. Sometimes we have to help them over the line when they face problems and uncertainties and they're not sure if it's the right thing to do. We're here to say, well, here are the policy steps that we're taking. Come on the journey with us.
You've got an issue this year of only convincing a handful physically. Of course, some of them had participated in that webinar yesterday, which I was telling my colleague a little earlier, didn't run as too smoothly, and I suppose it does heighten one structural reform that people are calling for, and that is bandwidth and the allocation of spectrum. So concerns are on the table with a multitude of structural reforms, and I suppose that will be brought up with investors this time around as well.
It will be. So if you think about where we were this time last year, very much still in the early stages of the spectrum process, but now we've far advanced. ICASA has issued the guidelines for how that process is going to run. There are firm deadlines in place. So we're moving. We've also seen the mobile operators also coming on board in terms of pricing of data and making commitments to reduce that. So it's a partnership. I think we have a long way to go, but given where we were last year, we've made some progress. And I think the pandemic has forced us to think about how we move to digital platforms. And as you say, even yesterday we were shocked by the volumes that we got. It shows interest, but it also tells us, we really have to up our game as a country.
When we talk about investment issues since the start of 2018's conference, we see a shift, perhaps, and government is probably signalling this, that we want to target those infrastructure investments a bit more prominently. But truly, I put it to you that some of the concerns that come through is that are those projects and investments targeted towards multiplier effects in the community? In other words, does it sort of this crippling problem that we have with unemployment? To what extent is that given attention, that the projects and the investments that come in have that multiplier effect to sort out 11 million people out of work in this country?
Yeah, I mean, there is a focus on that. So if you look at many of the projects are about enabling economic activity, so work around ports, work around bulk water and other types of infrastructure, work around logistics, is very much geared towards that. There are also projects which in themselves are located in communities and would drive would drive employment. So I think, you know, that the infrastructure strategy is very clear that there are multiple objectives, not too many, but that we have to have those economic projects that really do deliver, and I think you see those. At the same time, you also need those with high social multipliers because of the unemployment challenges that we have. We also have to deal with spatial concentration, that we don't want them all in Gauteng. So, you know, people might argue, does it make sense to have it in the outskirts? But absolutely, because you need the whole country connected. Connectivity is not just about telecoms, it's also about rail connectivity, it's about aviation connectivity, it's about different levels, it's about roads. So I think we're trying to achieve that in a balanced portfolio.
Trudy Makaya, thanks very much indeed. That's the President's economic advisor. The President is due, according to the agenda, to address investors around about 2 o'clock this afternoon.